Hey everybody, welcome to Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell, and I cannot be more excited to continue sharing with you guys personal finance topics that I think could be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. Today, we are going to be talking about living on a fixed income in retirement. Now, a lot of retirees, they get to this place where they have the same amount of money coming in every single month that they have to live on. The only problem with that is that the cost of living does not stay the same over time, and it can really leave you in a pinch if you were already running a tight budget. So we're going to talk about several tips as to how to live on a fixed income and ways in which fixed income can be created for you to live on in retirement. Before we get started though, if you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things that I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to create a financial plan that's specific to you and your family's needs and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just go to my website, www.mnowithdylan.com. Click on the Work with Dylan tab and you can choose the financial coaching session type that would work best for you, and we can begin pushing towards your long-term financial goals together. So a big buzzword in financial markets right now is inflation. And inflation is something that, it's an old economic topic, right? It's something that has been talked about all the time for many years. It's something that's been taught on in business schools. It's been taught on in economics classes. And it's just important to understand what inflation can do to your money, right? Because what inflation is simply the rise in prices over time. Right, the increase of the prices of goods and services over time. Now, quite obviously, as the prices of goods and services rise, but the amount of money that you make stays the same, then you are going to be able to purchase less goods and services with the money that you have, right? Which is the whole idea of today's episode, and I really nailed it down to retirement. And I'm just saying, in retirement, because a lot of retirees live on fixed incomes. Okay, and so if you live on a fixed income, it doesn't have to just be in retirement. These tips should work for anyone. It should work for anyone at any point in time. And it's ways that you can live on a fixed income even when something like inflation kicks in. Because right now, the big worry about inflation is the fact that coming out of the coronavirus pandemic, so much money has been pumped into financial markets, and the prices of all types of assets are going up. Right? If you've tried to buy a home anytime recently, the prices of homes have been skyrocketing. The prices of materials to build homes has been skyrocketing. And then all different types. If you've gone to the grocery store lately, I can tell you from personal experience, the cost of the same goods seems to be creeping upward, seems to be going up just a little bit more. Maybe I eat too much, I don't know. But I think the cost of goods and services are increasing right now, and we'll continue to see this into the future. And this is inflationary, right? This is going to devalue your money. Right? If you've ever heard somebody say it's going to devalue the currency, or it's going to weaken the dollar. Well, the dollar is weaker when the dollar can buy less goods and services relative to other currencies. Okay, so if inflation rises, then you're going to be able to buy less with what you make. Okay, and if what you make is fixed, if what you make is not adjusted for the cost of living, it's not adjusted for inflation, then your real purchasing power is going to decline as you move into that space where the cost of things is higher. Because with the exact same amount of money, if things cost more and you're still going to buy the same things, then you're going to be able to buy either less of the same things, or you're going to have less money left over after buying those same things than you did previously. Okay. Now, how does fixed income come about in retirement? Well, many ways. Okay. But we're just going to stick to a few. First off, if you have a pension, and I'm going to be talking about pensions in tomorrow's episode, but a lot of pensions are fixed payments. Now, some pensions have a cost of living adjustment on them, but those cost of living adjustments rarely adjust in a major way. They tend to have a 3% cost of living adjustment, which is perfectly fine for most years. But if you have some hyperinflationary period, which many argue we might have a higher inflation period here in the near future, right? If you have a high inflation period, then it's not going to adjust enough. But some pensions have no adjustment for the cost of living. They're just, you're going to receive this much per month over this amount of time, or for the rest of your life in retirement. And in receiving that much, right, the costs of goods are just naturally going to go up over time. And if you are living on a fixed amount of money, you're going to have to figure out how to do that, which is why I wanted to talk about this particular topic in today's episode. But that's just one way that you can have a fixed income. Another way that you could have a fixed income is if you have an investment portfolio, and that investment portfolio has bonds in it that are creating income for you. Because bonds are known as fixed income securities. And what that means is you invest in a bond, and typically what happens is it will pay a fixed amount of interest every time it pays interest, typically semi-annually with most bonds, right? It will pay a fixed amount of interest every time it pays interest. Okay, so that's going to be a fixed income to the investor, to you as the investor. Okay, so if you're living off of bond income, then you are living off of a fixed amount of income. In a similar way, as with bonds, if you're investing in dividend-paying stocks or preferred stocks that pay dividends, right, then that is also another way that you can have a fixed income. Because if you're just going to receive whatever income is coming from a particular company's dividends, if that company does not grow their dividends over time, then you're just going to receive the same dividends. Now, a lot of companies do grow their dividends, and so this isn't true fixed income, but the rate at which they grow their dividends is not necessarily connected to the cost of living. So that can turn out to be an issue for you if you're living on dividend income and the growth of those dividends does not match up with the increases in the cost of living over time. Then also, a lot of people in retirement live off of annuities and income annuities. And annuities are just, they are these financial products, these actually life insurance products, right, where they will pay you systematic payouts over time. And those payouts are fixed. Those payouts are typically the exact same payment every single time, especially if we're talking from a fixed income point of view. Now, obviously, you can have annuities that are invested and that can grow for you, and that can adjust the amount of money that you take off of that annuity. But annuities were initially made to pay you a fixed amount over time. Right? They're going to pay you some fixed income in retirement, and that's going to be money that you can live off of. Okay, so living off of annuities can also be problematic, right? Then let's say you own rental properties, okay, and you have rents that you're bringing in off of those rental properties, and you want to live in retirement off of those rents. Well, if you aren't increasing those rents to keep up with the cost of living over time, which I think you absolutely should be doing that, right? The cost of rent should be adjusted for the cost of living, okay? But if you're not increasing rents over time, then that can be more of a fixed income for you. You're not going to make more and more return over time. And especially if you are investing in rental real estate where there is some type of rent control, then that can be problematic to you as well and can leave you in a fixed income type of situation. And then there are other things that people invest in that can provide fixed income. Certificates of deposit, we've talked about those before and how they pay a fixed rate of interest. Treasury inflation protected securities are offered by the government and they pay you an agreed upon rate. So they're just another type of treasury bond, but they are adjusted for inflation. So at least that's there. But there are all these different types of ways that you can be getting a fixed income. Right? And if you're still working, right, you may be making a fixed income. You may be looking around going, I haven't gotten a pay raise in years, or I haven't gotten, anything substantial in the way of a pay raise in a long time. Okay. And I haven't gotten an adjustment for the cost of living. If there's going to be inflation, then, how am I going to keep up? And you may see in your own life, in your own budget, that the cost of goods is rising to a point where it's getting tighter and tighter on your budget, to where you're either not purchasing things that you would have purchased before, or you are left with less at the end of the month when it comes down to it, okay? But I want to focus on retirees specifically, and a lot of these things will overlap with individuals if you are living on some type of fixed income, right? But these are several tips for how you can live on a fixed income. The first of the tips is the simplest, okay? And it is you must track your expenses. You must budget. You must budget aggressively. Okay, you must know exactly where your income's coming from, and you must know exactly what you're spending money on every single month. Now, for a lot of people, there aren't huge nest eggs set aside. Okay, if you have a huge nest egg and you just happen to be living off of fixed income securities, right? Yeah, you're going to have to do a lot of these things, but you may have quite the cushion there to do some extracurricular things that your counterparts who live on tighter budgets or tighter incomes would be able to do. But nonetheless, you need to track your expenses. Okay, but especially if you're somebody who's just living off of a pension, or you're living off of a pension and Social Security. Social Security is something I didn't touch on a moment ago, but Social Security does have a cost of living adjustment. But what if the cost of living rises at a faster rate than that cost of living adjustment? Then you can be up a creek without a paddle, okay? So it's important, if you're living on just pension, bond income off of a small portfolio, Social Security, things like that, right? You have to know where your money's going, because if you let your expenses creep up on you and you're still living on the same amount of money, then that budget's going to get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And you know where that leaves you? That leaves you more likely to go into debt for something, right? Because if your expenses are creeping up, right, that's less money that you can have set aside for things that you need to purchase in cash, right? Because we know over time somebody's going to need to buy a new car, right? And if you're just beginning retirement and you've got an older car already, and you're going to need one at some point, and you're trying to save for it, but your expenses are creeping up to the point of that fixed income that you have, how are you going to save up for that car that you need? You're not going to be able to. Okay. And so what do people do? They'll go into debt for whatever car that they need, or they'll do other things on debt, right? They'll build credit card debt because they want to keep purchasing the same things, and yet their income has not moved. Right? They're trying to purchase more and more, but their income is not more and more. So you must track your expenses. You must be very diligent about creating a unique monthly budget, knowing where your money's going, giving each dollar a name, right? Knowing where all of that fixed income is going to go, and mapping out exactly when that fixed income is going to come in. Because with a lot of bonds and dividend paying stocks and things of the like, you're not getting paid every single month. Right? You may be getting paid semi-annually or quarterly or something of the like. And so you have to be able to map out your income and not just blow all that you make, right? If you make, this dividend income and it only comes in quarterly, right? And you go and spend it all in the next month. Well, you've got 2 more months where that dividend income doesn't even play into your budget, right? So you can't just blow all of the income that you make if it is not on a monthly basis, right? But we have to know what's coming in, when it's coming in, and we have to be able to know when things are going out. Okay, so track those expenses, keep really good detailed records, right? And this leads us to kind of my next thought, my next tip here is that means you have to live below your means. If you're living on a fixed income, you still have to live below your means. And again, this is going to be a big disparity between those who are just on Social Security and some modest pension, and those who have really big nest eggs and are making fixed income off of those big nest eggs. It's going to be real different here in what I'm about to say, because yes, both of you need to live below your means, but living below your means is going to look very differently between those two. All that I mean by living below your means is live on less than that fixed income is creating you, because the one individual that has quite the nest egg and has plenty of margin, right, they're going to be able to live below their means and that be super duper comfortable, right? But for somebody who is living on pension and Social Security income that's very modest, right, living below your means is going to be tighter than the individual who has the very nice nest egg, okay? But nonetheless, both individuals, in living on a fixed income, you have to live below your means, because as the prices of goods increase, if you're still living on that fixed income, right, then your budget's going to get tighter and tighter. So you already have to have some margin created. You have to have margin in mind when creating your budget, and know that you need X amount of margin. Forecast out, right, if the cost of goods is going to increase by this much per year, am I still going to be able to live 15 years from now, 20 years from now, whatever it may be? You need to be able to do those calculations on your own when you are setting your budget up, but make sure that you leave margin for yourself and live below your means, live below the amount of fixed income that you're actually bringing in. Now, another tip, and this tip is before you even enter retirement, get rid of your debt, okay? We cannot be in retirement and have a bunch of debt weighing on our income when our income is fixed anyway. Okay, we want to be able to keep as much margin in our budget as possible, and the best way to do that is to have as few expenses as possible. And for a lot of people, they go into retirement, they still have debt. They still have car payments. They still may have student loans lagging around. They may have some credit card debt. They may have some medical bills they need to pay, all these different types of things, right? They may still have their home, right? Now, I know this is something that I put on a different pedestal than just your other debts, right? I say you should pay off all your consumer debts in the fourth part of the financial action plan, and then wait until the seventh part to be paying off your home and paying it off early, right? But if you don't pay your home off by retirement, you're in retirement with your largest expense, right? We want to be able to get rid of our largest expense by the time we retire. And if we're able to do this, then that's going to create more and more margin in our budget. It's going to allow us to live below our means, even if, and especially if, we are living on some type of modest income, even if it's, just a pension or just Social Security or just whatever it is. If you don't have a house payment, it's going to be far more likely that you can live on that lower amount of fixed income than not, right? So getting rid of debt is absolutely vital. Now, even more vital than getting out of debt to be able to live in retirement, because a lot of people go into retirement and they've still got debt and whatever, right? But even bigger than that is staying away from debt once you are in retirement, right? Because if you go into retirement and let's say you've still got some debt, hanging around, and you end up paying off a car. Okay, well, that creates a little more margin in your budget. But then what happens? You go out and you buy another car and you finance another car, right? You go and finance that car. Well, let's say it's, the same number of years old as the car that you had purchased previously, with the same number of miles as the car that you'd purchased previously, right? And you look and you go, oh, well, this car costs more. It costs more than when you bought that other car way back when, right? Now, this type of car is going to cost more money, okay? And so you are going to be spending more in the way of debt payments than you were previously, and you're going to be bogged down with debt in retirement. It's going to be eating away at that fixed income that you have, and that's what we don't want. We don't want our fixed income to get eaten at by debts, by things where we're just throwing money away. That money is of no use to us because we're just throwing it into a bottomless pit. Okay, so be out of debt, stay out of debt, plan for large purchases in retirement, save up for large purchases in retirement, have that emergency fund in place, and maybe even buff your emergency fund up a little bit when you go into retirement. And so if anything were to happen and you need to, drop $10,000, $15,000 on something, then you can do that without having to go into debt. Okay, because if you're living on a modest income, then it's far more tempting to go into debt for something that is larger, especially if you don't have an emergency fund. If you don't have an emergency fund, you may not have any choice but to go into debt. But even if you have an emergency fund, right, and you have a very modest income, you may be very, very tempted to go into debt for something because you may think, oh, well, I can't afford that. But if you buff up your emergency fund a little bit, make it a little more comfortable to pay for whatever you need to pay for, then it can take care of that issue for you. But have to pay off your debt. Stay out of debt, stay out of debt, stay out of debt, because it's only going to eat away at your expenses over time. If you're somebody who's lived in debt your entire working life and you've not found it to be a big issue, but now you're going to live on some modest fixed income in retirement, listen to me. You can't do it anymore. Okay, you have to get out of debt because it's going to make all the difference over time because you need to create as much margin as possible in that budget. And margin is going to come from having less expenses because your income's obviously not going to be much higher because it is a fixed income. So we need to decrease expenses to go along with the fixed income to create margin, to create a space where we can go about living a comfortable retirement life, because that's what I want for you. I want you to be able to live a retirement life that is comfortable, okay? And you can't live comfortably if your expenses are knocking up against your income all the time or exceeding your income in some cases, right? You cannot live comfortably if you're doing that. And especially as the cost of goods and services rise over time, you're really not going to be able to do that. So I really want you to keep these things in mind and be very diligent about your budgeting process as you go into retirement with a fixed income. Now, another tip for retirement and for living on a fixed income is consider moving for tax savings, okay? Because your income is most likely lower than it was before retirement, Okay, for a lot of people, this is true. Your taxable income tends to decrease in retirement, even if you're bringing in the same amount. Only a certain percentage of Social Security is going to be taxable. If you're pulling money off of a Roth IRA, that money is going to be tax-free. You're going to have different tax treatments in retirement, and it's likely that you're going to pay less in taxes. Okay, you're going to have less taxable income. Okay, so if you're looking for additional tax savings, it's good to know that some states are more retirement friendly than others. That's why you see a lot of people move to Arizona and Florida every single year when they retire. And you go to Arizona or Florida, you see a bunch of old people playing golf. And nothing against the old people playing golf, because I'm sure I'll be one day. But that is why you see that occurring, because of the tax advantages. There are currently 9 states that do not charge income tax. And there are another 37 that don't tax Social Security benefits at all. Okay, and there are 4 states, Alaska, New Hampshire, Oregon, and Montana, that impose no sales tax. So all of these things can be very, very beneficial to you as a retiree, because if there's no income tax, state income tax, that's less taxes you're going to have to pay on the money that you're taking off your nest egg, right? If you have traditional IRAs and you're taking money off that you're going to have to pay income tax on, well, guess what? You're not going to have to pay income tax to the individual state, because they don't require you to do so, right? If you're bringing in Social Security, there's a bunch of states, they're not going to tax that Social Security benefit that you have, which can be beneficial to you, right? And then there are those other states that have no sales tax. Well, that's going to decrease your cost of living, the cost of your expenses as you go out and buy things and purchase things over time. There will be no sales tax, therefore leaving you with more margin in your budget. So moving for tax savings can be very useful. I know that a lot of people get stuck in their ways. They want to live in this one place and they like where they're living and all these types of things. But if where you're living is not very tax friendly and you're going to live on a fixed income, especially a modest fixed income, right, you may think about having this one-time moving expense and moving to somewhere where it's going to be more advantageous for you to live there and pay less in the way of taxes, and maybe substantially less in the way of taxes, and it can create more margin in your budget. Okay, to kind of go along with that, right, you may want to downsize to a smaller place. Like, even if you have a good amount of money, downsizing to a smaller place is not always a bad idea in retirement, because your willingness to take care of wherever you're living is going to go down and down and down over time, especially as you age. Okay, and your willingness to clean a big house when it's only you and your spouse, or it's only you, is going to go down. So if you're still living in the family home, now may be the right time to sell and move to a smaller, less expensive place. Doing so often gives you money to invest and save, and a smaller home will cost less to run. By selling, you may also lower your property taxes or have to pay none at all if you choose to rent. Okay, so all that I'm saying here is that if you downsize, right, there's a couple advantages that may come into play. Okay, if you've already got a paid off home and you downsize to something smaller, aka cheaper, right, then what you'll end up doing is you'll end up making money, because you'll sell your house and then you'll buy the other one in cash. We're not taking out any more loans. Again, stay away from debt as you're going into retirement with a fixed income. Okay, so we will take the equity out of that home when we sell it. Right, all of that equity that we have, we're going to pay for the new home in cash, and then have a bunch of money sitting aside that we can either add to our nest egg or put in our emergency fund or savings, or pay for something that we need, or whatever it may be. Okay, so you're going to have more money to do that. Now, even if your home is not completely paid off, okay, but let's say you're kind of pushing towards that place. Let's say you've got like 60% of it paid off or 70% of it paid off, then downsizing can get you much, much closer to having a paid off home in retirement. And allow you to live a more free life on a fixed income. Okay, because a big house can just be a drain. It can be a drain on your money in retirement. And for those of you who don't have a lot of money in retirement, no shame, no hate, but I know this is the realistic situation for a lot of people. And if you don't have a lot of money in retirement, then I want to help you to get to a place where you can retire comfortably. And it may mean moving out of the family home and moving into something much smaller. There are all these little like patio homes and townhomes and things that you can buy, you can purchase. You don't have to pay rent. You can actually purchase them, right, and own that home, right? But it's smaller, it's easier to live in, and it's more friendly to an older community. Okay, so downsizing can be a really, really good idea when it comes to living on a fixed income in retirement. Okay, now another tip for living on a fixed income is you must start early. Okay, you must start early in determining what you may need. You're going to have to start early in determining where your income is going to come from. You're going to have to start early in determining what your expenses are going to be. Because once you make that jump into retirement, then it's no holds barred. You're going to have to live on what you make, right? Live on that fixed income and pay your expenses and try to find the margin, try to find the difference there. It may take you some time to do this. It may take you some time to plan this out. It might not be perfect, right? But you want it to be as perfect as possible and as precise as you can make it, because the more precise you can make it, the better likelihood you have of actually being able to live on that fixed income in retirement. It's very, very likely that you can live on a fixed income if you have a plan. That's one of the biggest things in finance that I talk to you guys about all of the time. It's just having a plan, just being intentional. Understanding that if you just sit down and write things out and think logically and just live on less than you make, then you can win, right? I've talked all the time about how living on less than you make is the simplest thing I can say about personal finance. If I just left it at that, you could be successful. Now, there's a bunch of nuances. There's a bunch of things that I can help you to do otherwise. But if you just lived on less than you made, then you could be in a perfectly good position. But living on less than you make requires that you plan to live on less than you make, because otherwise, how are you going to know if you're living on less than you make or not, right? You have to have a plan. And then you have to constantly reassess the plan. Reassess the plan that you made previously, right? If you make a plan and then you're like, okay, I'm going to retire in 2 years and I'm going to have this, this, and this. These are going to be my expenses. Then you get in retirement and you realize that that's not the case. Then reassess, make adjustments, okay? Be willing to change. Be willing to do something different. Be willing to move out of a house and downsize, right? Be willing to try to get out of debt. Be willing to drive a car that is a bit older and maybe a little less reliable for a short period of time while you save up cash to purchase something so you don't go into debt, right? Be willing to make some sacrifices if you absolutely have to, because living on a fixed income in retirement is not always easy. And in it not being easy, right, it's very, very simple to just give in and do the wrong things. Make sure that you're very diligent, very intentional, and you have a plan for what you're doing, okay? Then the last tip that I'll give about living on a fixed income in retirement is you don't have to live on a fixed income in retirement. Okay. Now, just because you've retired doesn't mean that you never have to do anything again. Find something that you actually enjoy. Create some type of side hustle that you can, make things and sell things, or, do some type of e-commerce or something that you're really good at. Sell something, make something, whatever, right? Whatever it is that you can do to create some income on the side, do that. Right? Do that and allow that money to create more margin for you in your budget. Now, I will give you a heads up. Do not rely on that money. Do not rely on that side hustle income being there, right? Still be able to live on your fixed income. But if you have the side hustle, if you have the ability to make money on the side, then you don't have to constantly worry about the cost of living and about pinching every penny. You still need to be budgeting. You still need to have a plan. But what you can do is you can take that money and allow it to be your fun money, your extra money to do things with, to have fun with, to create more margin in your budget with that money. And the more margin you have, the more things you can do and the more fun you can have. And you may really find a second passion in life, or maybe a first passion if your first job or the job you retired from is not your passion. Right? You may find a passion in life that you never thought you could. Try to find something that you're good at, something that is a fun hobby or something, and see if you can't turn it into a business. See if you can't turn it into something that creates cash flow for you. And if it can, then that's a way that you can really combat the fixed income nature of the rest of the money that you're bringing in. And you may even get to a place where you don't have to take money off of the fixed income instruments that we talked about earlier. You may not have to take money off of your nest egg if you're making enough money in your side hustle. If your side hustle is really becoming something substantial, right? You may not have to take money off your investments. And that can be really, really beneficial, because then your money can grow more over time and create a larger nest egg for you, to where if you decide to give the side hustle up at some point or slow it down, then you can live off of what you have, and you'll actually have more to live off of at that point. Okay. All I'm saying here, it is extremely possible to live off fixed income. Tons of people do, but you have to be smart about it, especially if that fixed income is pretty tight relative to your expenses, especially if that fixed income is relatively modest. You're just getting some small pension and Social Security. You need to be very, very diligent about how you spend your money, where you spend your money, and exactly what you do every single month. You have to have a plan. You have to budget. You have to know where each dollar is going. Track those expenses. Be very, very intentional about your money. I know you can do it, right? You just have to decide that you are going to try, because a lot of people get into retirement and they'll just be like, I just don't want to think about money anymore. I don't want to try to keep up with all the bills anymore and do all and they'll kind of mail it in retirement, and that's absolutely not the way to go. Stay diligent, stay smart, do only what you can afford to do. But for some people, doing what you can afford to do can be absolutely a lot, right? But if it's not for you, then know that you just need to have a plan, you need to have a budget, and find a way to have the income that you need to cover the expenses that you must have, and then create as much margin as you can and live on less than you make. So thanks for watching this episode. If you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to create a financial plan that is specific to you and your family's needs and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just go to my website, www.MNOwithDylan.com. Click on the Work with Dylan tab, and you can choose the financial coaching session type that would work best for you, and we can begin pushing towards your long-term financial goals together. So tune in tomorrow as I talk about pensions and why they are dying and what you may need to do about it. So thanks for tuning into this episode of Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. God bless.